Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. We got a little bit of a glimpse at Purdue basketball here this summer as Purdue took its trip to Canada, got 4 games in, recording this here after Purdue's third game against the University of Calgary. I'm not sure that the fourth game is going to be streamed. From what I gathered, it's not going to be. And I am going to be out of town, heading out of town on Thursday morning. So I think we have enough from these first 3 games to talk a little bit just about what I observed and some of my thoughts on Purdue now that we've seen 120 minutes of basketball with a very, very new look team. So let's just go ahead and get into it. If you don't, be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Boilers Beyond, talking all about this, talking all about football media days, football preview, all of that. Come join the conversation. Subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on your favorite podcast platform. Like, subscribe, give the show a positive review. We're going to be here all year long, all the way through the end of basketball season and beyond, coming at you every week. So come enjoy. And before we get on into the show and talking about the Boilermakers, I want to tell you about someone that I know and trust, and that's myself. If you've been putting off reviewing your insurance, now is a great time to get a quote from me, Jordan Jones with Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance. Whether it's home, auto, life, business insurance, or anything else, I'll take the time to understand what you need. Make sure you're properly protected. No pressure, no obligation, just a chance to see if you can get the right coverage at a competitive price. Give me a call at 317-846-5861 or reach out today for a free quote, and be sure to mention that you heard about it here on the podcast. Now let's dive into Purdue in Calgary and Vancouver, where this is a very, very different looking Purdue team, and everything starts with the disclaimer that this all needs to be taken for what it's worth. The competition is questionable, right? If you watched the game that was free on Saturday, the Vancouver Selects did not look very selective. They were terrible, and Purdue treated them as such. Purdue blew the Vancouver Selects out. The Trinity Western team hung with Purdue a little bit. Trinity Western launched a bunch of threes. Purdue left like 15 points on the floor in the first half that would have really blown the thing open. And then Calgary is an NCAA Division II team that Purdue handled with relative ease. And at times in that game, Purdue was just thoroughly dominant. So this is a far cry from Purdue playing 2 Big Ten games a week for 9 weeks in a row, right? That's not what you're seeing here. But this was a decent indicator of where Purdue is at, because this is all new. This is everything new. You know, Purdue had as much continuity as anyone in the country over the last couple of years, and now that's gone. And while you have some familiar faces on the floor, they're all in new roles. They're all doing different things. Purdue played very differently that we'll get into. So it does give you a chance to make some observations. I will also add that the rules were different. Playing with a 24-second shot clock is very different when you're a team like Purdue that's fairly deliberate in the half court, that runs a lot of sets, that isn't super iso ball one-on-one. You know, that's something that Purdue doesn't do much of. Not that you have to in a 24-second shot clock, but it doesn't give you much room to wiggle when you don't get a shot off of your first action on the set. You know, you're up the court and you're already dealing with 15 to 20 seconds left on the shot clock. You don't get that first, the first quick hitter off of a set. Boy, then you're dealing with late clock situations. It's a different game. You're playing quarters instead of halves. That's different. The way the fouls work is different. Purdue was obviously playing this in what is a conventional pattern for these international trips, but a way you would never play in a real game where you're doing hockey substitutions every 5 minutes. Purdue was starting one group, a different group in each of the 3 games, and then bringing another group off the bench halfway through each quarter, which, great. I mean, these trips are not about maximizing the margin of victory. These trips are about seeing what you have, seeing what works together, what doesn't work together. And Purdue was able to tinker with quite a bit on that front. So all of that being said, I don't know that I would look at the margin of victory as the best indicator of things, but you did get to see some really interesting stuff. And I think perhaps the biggest takeaway is that I don't know that there's a ton of separation on the proverbial depth chart at this point, especially in that backcourt, where Purdue has a pretty solid backcourt. With what you've seen on this trip and what you've seen over the last few years, you have 5 guys in your backcourt that you feel pretty good about. Luke Ertl coming in as a freshman looks the part. He looks like someone that can really help you from day one. Purdue's very invested in Omer Meyer, and I know some folks are really worked up about his lack of a big performance on this trip, but he did some really good things in Big Ten play last season. He's very proven on the international circuit. Purdue needs him. Purdue really needs Omer Meyer to have a nice season. That is the most logical path to Purdue achieving the results that its fans want it to achieve this year. CJ Cox, Jakari Harris, both have been in the program for a couple of years. Jakari Harris was awesome in Canada. He was fantastic. And then Antoine West is everything so far that he's been cracked up to be. Really good stuff. You have 5 guys in that backcourt, but no one has really separated yet. Now, you weren't going to have that on this trip. It's not like you're going to see Purdue play some D2 level competition and say, oh my gosh, we've got to go this way. We've got to make sure this player gets 34 minutes a game. No, that's not where you're going with things. But as the season progresses, as Purdue gets into non-conference play, as Purdue practices for the season, I think you'd like to see some separation. In the front court, you kind of see the same thing where Daniel Jacobson is your most important player there, but it's not like there's been above and beyond better play between him and Raleigh Burgess. Caden Pierce did some good things, but you don't have a bunch of breakout star guys at this point. Now, depth can be a really good and bad thing. We'll talk about this throughout this episode, but it's a wonderful thing to have that many guys who you feel good about playing. The downside is when you don't have a guy, especially if you get to a point where you don't have a guy or two on offense, then you really find yourself in a tricky position, kind of the way Purdue was in that 2019-2020 season when it wouldn't have made the NCAA tournament more than likely because Purdue's offense wasn't very good. You had Sasha Stefanovic as a good 3-point shooter. Matt Harms could do some good things. Eric Hunter did some all right things. Travion Williams came on as the season went along. But Purdue didn't have a guy that would go get you a bucket, a guy that you ran everything through. And you want to have that. You want to have your top players emerge. It's abundantly clear that Purdue needs Enzo Shahrvin. And I don't know if I've even said his name at this point on the podcast. I've really tried to hold off on talking about him until he was cleared because I thought that was going to happen months ago. But here we are. He is with the team. He traveled with the team to Canada. He has not been cleared to play by the NCAA. It sounds like there are some stipulations related to the amount of money he made as an overseas professional. Purdue's roster page for him, he's on the roster on PurdueSports.com. That indicates that he has 1 year of eligibility remaining, which we know. It's not like he's a multi-year player. Purdue needs him. That front court is pretty thin. You are really small in that front court without him. Daniel Jacobson played with some confidence this week. You saw him trying to dunk everything, which is always a good sign of some aggression, some want to. I don't want to say that wasn't there last year, but when Daniel Jacobson hit that freshman wall last year, he hit that thing hard. And it got to a bad point. It got to a point where students were booing him when he checked into a game at Mackey Arena. It got rough. It got really rough. And I give him all the credit in the world for coming back to fight through this. But, we'll see. We'll see where he's at, how much of a year two jump he can take. Raleigh Burgess brought some great energy, but I don't know that you look at him yet as some destination guy, some guy who's a real producer of points. And not that Enzo Shahrvin's going to be that, but he provides some depth. Caden Pierce can rebound, but he's not a bruiser. Jack Benter's an undersized 4. Purdue could use Enzo Shahrvin in that mix at the 5. Whether he can play alongside Raleigh Burgess or Daniel Jacobson seems to be a pretty big question. By all accounts, Enzo Shahrvin is a 5. Even at 6'8", everything you hear, he's a 5. He's not a 4. He can do some stuff rolling to the basket, but it's not some big bag of offensive game he has. He's a defender. He's a rebounder. And that's something Purdue could use. That's something Purdue could really use here. Sinan Huan does not look ready. I think you see some things that make you intrigued about his future. He can move all right for his size, and that's a big battle. It's something that Purdue talked a lot about Zach Edey. He can move, and that gives you reason to believe for Sinan Huan, but he has a long way to go. It feels like a real stretch to project him as a contributor. Purdue needs Enzo Shahrvin in that mix up front. Offensively, and just it as a whole, this team looks really different. When you look at the offensive personnel grouping Purdue has, this is going to be a team that shoots a boatload of three-pointers. And that's a double-edged sword because it brings a lot of variance into the picture. Variance can be fun. Variance can be good. It is kind of the Alabama under Nate Oates thing to a certain degree. Purdue's not going to be that crazy, I don't think. But when you shoot a ton of threes, you can win any game you play in. Because if you get hot and you make 15, 18 three-pointers, it becomes a really difficult math equation for another team to match up with. On the flip side, if you have that day where you go 5 of 27 from 3, unless you're offensive rebounding in an insane clip, and I don't know that this team looks like that type of a group, you open yourself up to do weird things like lose at the Bryce Jordan Center, like lose at home to a middling Big Ten team. That gets opened up, and there's only so much you can do about it. The three-point shot can be a fickle thing. Purdue doesn't look like it has a great inside game to fall back on right now. We'll see what Daniel Jacobson can bring. The lob stuff is intriguing. Purdue's going to find some ways to get production out of the post because it always does. But this is a very guard-heavy team. And I don't know that you have a lot of guards that are the type that can really get to the rack off the bounce. Omer Meyer's not that. Luke Ertl doesn't really seem to be that. Very early, but he's smaller. It's a big ask. CJ Cox isn't really that. He's more of a pull-up guy. Same with Omer Meyer. Antoine West is probably your best bet there, but I think for most of these guys, they need ball screens to really generate a ton of action. So it'll be really, I'm curious to see what PJ Thompson really tries to do offensively, but it's going to be a team that shoots a lot of threes. The positive is it could be a team that's really good at shooting three-pointers. Omer Meyer shot well late last season. CJ Cox has shot really well for 2 years. Jakari Harris shot well on this trip. He's been up and down at Purdue. Antoine West can shoot it. Luke Ertl can shoot it. Jacob Weber was hilarious, man. The guy, Jacob Weber can really shoot it, and he's not shy. He's very trigger happy. He's someone who can just shoot the lights out. Everything that you thought he would be when he came in is what you saw on this trip. So there are 6 guys you feel really good about their upside as a three-point shooter. and that's intriguing. The energy and the effort was noticeable. I don't want to say that Purdue didn't play with that the last couple of years, because that's really far from true. But it was notable to see the energy that Purdue played with, the intensity that Purdue approached defense with, the hustling after loose balls. I don't want to say that Purdue got bored the last couple of years. That's not fair to anybody to say that. But I think there's a little bit of a hunger to this team, because none of these guys have accomplished anything. C.J. Cox, Jakari Harris, Omer Meyer, Daniel Jacobson, they've been parts of a team that accomplished some good stuff, but they haven't gone out and done it themselves yet. This is their time now. And seeing Purdue play with some fire, play with some hunger, was really positive. That defensive ball pressure was really notable. That's something that you haven't seen Purdue do in a while. The great, I guess, I don't want to overuse the term double-edged sword, because I can really overuse terms, but Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Wren were awesome players at Purdue. They were awesome players. They're program legends. But they were not particularly good two-way players. I think you would look at all three of them and say that they were net negatives, or below average defenders, while they were elite offensive pieces. All three of them were elite offensive pieces. So absolutely worth it. They were awesome players and won more games than anyone ever has at Purdue. But the defense left a lot to be desired, and there was only so much that Purdue could do defensively. That was kind of the hard part, was that you would see Purdue really struggle at times defensively, because it was a very exploitable team. Now you're seeing Purdue really try to pressure the basketball, do things a lot differently, because you have the personnel for it. Antoine West was awesome in that. In the game against Calgary, he had 4 steals in like 5 minutes. He was great. He was great. You saw Luke Ertl try to be really active. He got hit with some fouls, but C.J. Cox can guard. Omer Meyer can do some all right things. Purdue has the ability to play that way on defense a little bit more. And one of the positives of having that depth at guard and having that lack of separation is that maybe you don't worry as much about foul trouble. Where if one guy gets in foul trouble, okay, next man up. Because I just go back to the Calgary game that I watched last night, and Purdue picked up some fouls quick at times. I mean, Calgary was in the 5 foul bonus really quick in one of those quarters, like 2 or 3 minutes in, because Purdue was really handsy on the perimeter. But you also saw Purdue blitz Calgary right away by forcing a ton of turnovers on the perimeter. That's going to be a big focal point for Purdue, and it's a program that we approach a lot through the lens of KenPom analytics, where the offense has been historically great. I think this year you may see that defense flirt with the top 20, come back into that range, but I don't see the offense being that number 1, probably even a top 10 offense. That'd be a huge ask for this team. You're going to see Purdue operate a little differently there. Now, an area that I really noticed that needs some work for Purdue, and it's very correlated to that ball pressure, is Purdue's transition offense. Way too many times, Purdue would force a turnover and not score off of it. Or Purdue would have a golden opportunity and not score off of it. I think back to the... maybe it was the Vancouver game, the first game that Purdue played. It all kind of blends together now. But Purdue had a couple situations early on where it forced a turnover in the backcourt and then didn't score. If you're going to do that, you got to score off of it. I mean, if you get a wide open 3 and miss, then so be it. But you had that. You had a couple times in transition where in the Calgary game, Omer Meyer got blocked at the rim. Whatever it may be, whatever decision-making it may be, turnovers, bad shot selection, Purdue's got to be better in transition offense. This is not a team that's going to at least I think, blow you away from an offensive efficiency standpoint. So when you get freebies like that, you got to take advantage. You always do. But that's an area that Purdue's got to shore up a little bit. But it makes sense, right? In transition offense the last couple of years, you had the best passer we've ever seen at Purdue leading the way. You had a dead-eye three-point shooter in Fletcher Lawyer. You don't have that. So it's going to take some time. You got new guys playing out there, but that's a big area for Purdue. Right now, just where we stand post this Canadian trip, I don't really know what to make of this Purdue team. I really don't. There are some things to really like. There are some areas of concern, without question. You saw Purdue's interior defense struggle at times when it wasn't forcing turnovers on the perimeter, and when some teams were able to get inside against Purdue, it wasn't always great. That's a big deal, and I think Enzo Shahrvin can help there, but Purdue needs Daniel Jacobson to have a big year. Purdue needs Raleigh Burgess to have a big year. Caden Pierce is a good piece. He looks the part, man. I don't know if he's going to be some massive scorer, but he's probably Purdue's best rebounder right now. He can defend. He's athletic. That's a really good pickup. That was a really, really big pickup for Purdue. A big recruiting win, getting him when some other really big programs wanted him. Rivers Knight and Sinan Juan don't look like they're really going to be part of the rotation here, but Purdue's going to have more whittling down to do. As you always say, you can't really play more than 9 and make it make sense. And you have those 5 guards who are going to play. Then what? Where does Jacob Weber slot in? Is he a good enough shooter that he's going to force himself onto the floor? Quite possibly. Daniel Jacobson, Raleigh Burgess are playing. Caden Pierce is playing. Where does Jack Benter fit into all of this? If Enzo Shahrvin gets cleared, you've got 11 or 12 guys there vying for real minutes that you can't play 12 guys. You can't play 11 guys. It's not realistic. There's going to have to be some real internal separation here, and the battle for some of these minutes is going to be intense. It's going to be real. Purdue has a lot of good players. Purdue needs a couple of guys to emerge as great players, but I will say that I do think this is probably a pretty good year for Purdue not to have as much of a gauntlet of a non-conference schedule. Purdue still has good games. There are still good teams mixed in there. Purdue plays Gonzaga, Iowa State, Tennessee. I don't know a ton about DePaul or Oklahoma this year, or Colorado really, but those are 3 lesser power conference opponents, but still power conference opponents nonetheless. This is not a bad year for that, though, because Purdue's going to have a lot to figure out on the front end of things. It's an intriguing group, and I think quite possibly the biggest story of it all, it's going to be a great year to really use as a case study of how Purdue wants to build. And it won't just be this year, because this year is the great reset. You lost your top 4 scorers. You lost 3 all-time program players. This is a transition year of sorts. Whatever you do this year is great, but boy, if you can retain these guys, keep in mind, you don't lose anyone. You lose Caden Pierce, but that's it on paper. And Enzo Shahrvin, obviously, if he gets cleared, he's a 1-year guy. But boy, if you can keep a lot of this, it's going to be a great test of Purdue's ability to retain players. That's going to be a heck of a test here if things go well. But boy, you get really excited about seeing real continuity, this team sticking together year over year. That's pretty interesting. There's a lot to be interested in here. It's a lot to like. A lot to like about this Purdue team. A lot of question marks, mind you. But this trip brought out plenty to be optimistic about, plenty of questions. I think it's fair. Any preseason prognostication of Purdue is fair. If you're betting on Purdue as a really high-level team, as a team to compete in that top 4, that triple bye range in the Big Ten tournament, you're betting on some guards really breaking out, and you're betting big on Purdue's program stability and coaching being a big difference maker. I'm not saying it's a bad bet, but that's what you're betting on. it's a long way between now and the season. This is kind of a halfway point from where Purdue is now to when the season starts in November. So we'll see what further separation takes place. We'll see what further clarity we get. But this was a positive for Purdue. There's no other way to spin it. Getting to play these games, getting to experience this as a team has to be a positive. And now it's going to just come down to what Purdue can do between now and November to really iron things out and figure out how it's going to play its best basketball. But this was a fun trip. It was fun to have something to watch. Summer's the worst, man. I am not a summer person. There's no college football. There's no college basketball. I love the Cubs, but there's only so much regular season baseball you can watch before you go insane. So it was fun to watch Purdue basketball. I still maintain the two biggest keys to Purdue reaching its proverbial ceiling this year are Omer Meyer and Daniel Jacobson. I said it a month ago, and I still believe that. Yes, Antoine West looked awesome. Jakari Harris was really good. Luke Ertl looks ready to contribute right away. But for Purdue to really reach that ceiling, you need the guys to come through that you put your roster together thinking they'd be your best players. How often does that happen? That you really build your roster thinking, all right, we're building around these guys, and then they don't turn out to be those high-level guys, and then it still works out, or it works out better than you thought. That's a rarity. That doesn't happen much. So I do think Purdue really needs Omer Meyer and Daniel Jacobson to have good years, but so much to be interested in that backcourt, really. This is a dynamic Purdue backcourt that you haven't seen in quite a while, and if Purdue can really shoot well from three this year, then it's going to open up a lot of opportunities. So I've rambled for long enough here. That's about all there is to reasonably say about exhibitions in elementary school gyms against Canadian D2 teams. I appreciate you all listening. We'll be back next week to look at Purdue's football schedule. I'm recording this a couple hours before Barry Odom talks at Big Ten Media Days. We'll talk about that as well. Deep football dive next week as the Countdown to Kickoff series really gets going. Until then, guys, enjoy your weekend. We'll talk soon. Take care.